This podcast may contain adult language and themes, or it might not. We're not really sure. We haven't recorded it yet.
I'm Jason.
I'm Diggs.
I make software, music, and podcasts.
I connect people personally and professionally, and I like talking with Jason.
This is the Candy Factory 5x5 podcast.
5 conversations.
5 random topics.
5 minutes each.
When we hear this sound,
we move on to the next topic. Next.
On every episode, we invite a very special guest to join us. And that very special guest on this episode of 5x5 is Lauren Dill. Welcome, Lauren.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today.
It's great to have you on the program. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm originally from Lancaster County, and so being at the Candy Factory is a beautiful full circle moment for me. Moved to South Florida and then had a little bit of time in Knoxville, Tennessee. I was a TV host on a home shopping network, and now the Candy Factory has been an amazing opportunity for me to use their media center to start a new television show called On the Edge with Lauren.
That's awesome. Well, and now that you're an official member of the Candy Factory, it is our studio. Not their studio. How about that?
That's true. That's true. I'm embraced.
A new friend, a new member joining us just this year. It's great to have you on board with us. Diggs, my friend, always a pleasure to see you.
Hello. Good to see you.
It's great to be here. It's this is episode number 40 of the Candy Factory 5x5 podcast. And, you know, we couldn't do this show without the support of the mothership, the Candy Factory co-working campus right here in the heart of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Did you know for $10 you can be a virtual member and you can be tapped into this network with all the wonderful people who hang around here? And right now, you know, in COVID times, the virtual network is the network for the most part. We are open, but there's a lot more going on virtually than in person. Hopefully that's coming back soon. Because if you wanted to go up to the $35 social membership, then you're coming to our in-person events, which are coming in 2021. And we have other memberships all the way up to the quadruple platinum, which means you own the city. You can actually own Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Did they give you a key?
It's for, you just make a check out to me for $30,000 a month, and you own the city. Coworkinginlancaster.com for more on that. All the details, come and see us, schedule a tour. We'd love to talk to you about joining our community. If you're new to the program, this is the way it works. We have an iPad. His name is Frank. He's right over there. And Frank will dish up 5 random topics. We'll talk about each for 5 minutes. He will play us a little jingle to cue us on to the next topic. And that's it. It's 25 glorious minutes of internet glory. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks to our producer, Ann Kirby, who will be dropping our tidbits along the screen during this program. You guys feeling good? Feeling
Very
good? You ready for episode 40 of the Candy Factory 5x5 podcast?
Absolutely. What an honor.
Here we go. Frank, what's our first topic? Talk radio. Talk radio.
Okay.
Well, I have to ask Lauren, did you ever dabble in talk radio in your hosting career?
You know what? I feel like it was one of those things that kind of should have evolved. Does podcasting kind of count?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. It's sort of the evolution.
Considering.
Well, in that regard, yes. I started a podcast just a couple months ago called The Female Phoenix, and it's a women's empowerment podcast that talks about obstacles and then how to rise above.
That's awesome, and we will link to that in the show post for today's episode, and all your projects will be linked up there if you're interested. You know, talk radio for me. I was a radio guy in college in the late '80s, early '90s, and I was a rock and roll guy. You know, like I was into the music side of things. As I wanted to be a disc jockey when I was a little kid, and ended up in college radio. But after college, I really got into talk radio, and it was literally driving a lot. And I bought this van right out of college that didn't have anything. That had radio. It didn't have like a cassette player or a track or whatever. And so I literally, that's all I had was the radio. And I lived in Nashville, Tennessee for about 6 years. So from Pennsylvania, and then I lived in Florida for a little while too, South Florida as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I would, driving those 18-hour drives like from here down to Florida, I would listen to talk radio. I really got into it. And through the 90s, I was a talk radio guy. So I loved the format. I loved the whole call. I used to call in, long-time listener, first-time caller, that guy. And I would call in and I would throw my 2 cents at the host and stuff. A lot of local Nashville guys back in the 90s I was into. And I listened to the national guys too. And the thing about it, I love the format, but I never went into radio. And I ended up, when podcasting became a thing years later, after I got into software and stuff, I picked it up, but basically because I was like, oh, I always wanted to do radio. I could just make my own.
There you go.
So about 10 years ago, I started doing that. Diggs, did you listen to talk? Have you ever been like a fan of talk radio? You're from New York, right? There's a lot of great talk radio out there.
I mean, no, but not for any particular reason. My grandmother listened to a lot of talk radio, so if I came home from school, usually it was on in the background before I had to. This is usually what happened. She'd have talk radio on. I would go watch something on PBS, and then 4 o'clock would roll around, and then it was my job to record Okra for her, and then set it up, and then go back to watching my show on PBS. But no, I've been getting into listening to NPR while I'm in the car of late.
Yeah.
Not that I drive that often, but I was realizing that I was getting tired of like listening to my Spotify playlist. So I was like, let's mix it up. Let's hear what's going on in the world. I've finally developed an appreciation for This American Life. I think I've mentioned on a previous episode of our lovely 5x5 that I don't like the way that they cut in overlay, or I don't know what the technical term is. I don't like the way that they'll like have someone talking like the point of the story, and then whatever that guy's name is it Ira Glass?
Ira Glass, yeah.
And then he'll cut in with his like, and then they were doing this, and then they'll say the exact same thing. I'm like, why was we didn't need your voice in that 2 seconds. Like, just like that used to drive me. I literally wouldn't listen to This American Life because of that. But
knowing you and knowing that show, I could totally see the collision there.
If only he knew. That was the only hiccup.
I got over it though. I've gotten used to it. It's still not my favorite thing, but
Should be like, dear Ira, I love your show, but let me give you a little feedback.
Yeah, can you dial back the interruption?
I feel like I'm the only one. I'll leave it alone.
You never know. You never know.
You know, the whole podcasting thing is really interesting, and maybe we'll talk about it more someday when we have more than 5 minutes to talk about talk radio, which really isn't podcasting. But it came out right through the Apple products and the original iPods and stuff, and then it did not really catch on. And it was really the NPR shows when the professional radio studios saw it as a way to distribute their content that it really took off around 2009 or so, 2008, 2009. But it was a thing back in like 2004, sort of like blogging.
Oh.
If you guys know the original blogging, I had a blog in 2003, and it was like called a weblog. That's where I came from, weblog, and it was shortened to blog. But it wasn't for years later until like the news sources started to consider themselves like to have like a blog part of their website. But it legitimizes the technology, right? And that's sort of what happened. NPR was really, I say, kind of responsible because all of a sudden, like This American Life and Radio Lab and Planet Money and those shows that they are producing, and suddenly it was like, oh, this platform is actually very high quality. Mm-hmm. It's not just a bunch of people sitting around like in a basement, like kind of just ranting about stuff,
or spread out across a few floors of a warehouse in Lancaster.
Well, my friends, I'm sorry to say this, but it's time to turn the dial to topic number 2 of this episode's 5x5, which is Occupy Wall Street.
Oh, okay.
Occupy Wall Street.
I think I know why this was suggested.
Do tell, my friends.
So when was that? 09, 08, 09?
Yeah, right around then.
I was I think it was like end of high school into maybe first year of college, but somehow, some way, I ended up writing a piece about my annoyance with Occupy Wall Street. So for full context, from New York originally, and I think I definitely was in high school at this point. From New York originally, and I was home on a break from high school. I went to boarding school, and people just kept saying, "Oh, you should come down to Zuccotti Park, and we're occupying Wall Street." I'm like, "Okay, well, why are you there?" "Oh, because Johnny's there." "Okay, well, why is Johnny there?" "Oh, because Brenda told him to be there." Like, so wait, you all are just there, and you don't really know what you're talking about? And my issue was, like, I actually agreed with the movement. I thought that, the bonuses on Wall Street after the collapse.
Yeah, right.
The Great Recession made no sense. I totally agreed with that. But I just didn't understand, why am I going to go to a random park that I don't like? It's very small. You can't really breathe in there. It shouldn't even be called a park, but that's another story. So I wrote this piece, and it was Huffington Post put out a call, like, if you're a student, we want to know your opinion. So I wrote a piece, and I compared Occupy Wall Street to when my friends tried to get me into Harry Potter originally, when I was also, again, like, well, why are you reading it? And, couldn't get a straight answer. I did eventually read Harry Potter, and I loved the series, but things have to you can't just tell me, oh, you should do this. You need to make a point. You need to have a reason. And I didn't think Occupy Wall Street made much sense because it didn't really have a reason. And it,
unfortunately, the people that I experienced during Occupy were all the same as what you're describing. Right. Like Occupy Lancaster was there for a good while, 6 months or something like that. And I remember one day, I just kind of stayed away from it. I didn't really have anything to do with it. And one day I walked down, I was walking by, and two guys were standing by their tents, and I walked up and I said, "What's this all about?" And they were like, "No," they had no idea. It was just Woodstock without music. It was just like camping. It was just hanging out in the park.
Survivalist via Lancaster or New York.
Yeah.
Probably cheaper than the rent that they were paying in New York anyway, a tent, more square footage.
Absolutely. How about you, Lauren? Like, what were your thoughts of Occupy when it went down?
To be completely honest, I knew it was happening. It didn't really resonate with me. I feel that during the time I was a fifth grade teacher.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so my career path was kind of all over the place. I was a teacher for 10 years and then became a TV host. So during that time, I was just so focused on my little 5-year-olds that whatever was going, or 10-year-olds, whatever was going on in the world, it wasn't in my classroom walls,
They weren't. You weren't doing economics.
Not yet. We gotta get past fractions first.
I could totally see that being a movement that seems extraordinarily important for those who are involved and people who are sort of tapped into politics and stuff,
right?
But completely lost on everybody. Like, that's one of those things that I could see being just not even registering.
And if you were invested in it, I'm sure, it resonated with you because it affected you. But like you said, if it doesn't directly affect your everyday life, you're kind of like, but I'll deal with that tomorrow.
My parents are in their late 70s. I'll bet I could say tomorrow, what do you guys think of Occupy Wall Street? And they would look at me like they have no idea what I'm talking about. I bet they would have no idea what I'm talking about. And I bet there's a lot of people who feel that way. But it was big.
Yeah.
It was big.
Yeah.
It was really, for me, Occupy was really the introduction to Twitter and how Twitter could, because I remember, I don't know how I ended up, I was kind of new to Twitter. Twitter was relatively new, right? Like 2006, I think it started, but it really took off in 08, 09, so right around that time. And I remember following the events, just the hashtags and stuff, and being like, wow, this is really powerful. How people are real-time posting these little snippets. You couldn't even keep up, right?
Yeah,
that's that true. Spot.
I will give them that the in terms of getting the word out about which Occupy section needed, because a lot of what I was reading, at least out of New York, was like, oh, the group at Zuccotti Park needs 20 sandwiches and the organizing power that I saw through Twitter was really good, but when it came to actual substantive stuff, again, I go back to my previous point, and I will be quiet.
Reference my article.
Yes.
I'm going to just reference my piece in the Huffington Post. I get it.
It's not up anymore. Actually, they did a purge of student content, and it is no longer there. But that's okay.
Well, and that's okay to me too, because it's time for us to occupy topic number 3 of this episode's 5x5, which is corridor versus hallway versus tunnel. Corridor versus hallway versus, what the hell is this even?
I don't.
A friend of ours named Rick D suggested this topic to us.
Well, Rick,
yes.
This means a lot to you, so we're going to dive in.
Which one do you
I-
occupy, I guess is the question.
No,
Well, I feel like they're all different, you know?
Well, right. So here was the premise. It was thinking about when you're going through a passageway of any sort. What do you call the different ones? Because it's no. Wait. Because it started with somebody was talking about going through the passageway from again, this was New York related, passageway from the north side of Port Authority, the big bus terminal, to the south side of Port Authority, there's like two ways you can do it. You can go through this, I call it a tunnel, he called it a pathway, or you can go up and over on a bridge, which another person called a corridor. And so that's how this ended up. Like,
So you had this debate with Rick over what to call this.
There was a few of us.
We should put versus pathway now down at the bottom. There should be 4.
Yeah, that's a good point. How did pathway not, like, who discriminated against pathway? To keep pathway off the list here.
I did.
Gosh, we've just like combined it to corridor. We were just like, they're the same.
So, Diggs, tell me the difference between a corridor, hallway, tunnel, and pathway.
So I think a corridor is linking two distinct things.
Okay.
So it's not like within a building. A long passage in a building from which doors lead into rooms apparently is the official definition. So I'm wrong. But I'm going to stick with what I said. A hallway is, in my opinion, if you're in a building going past doors or spaces that are somewhat contained. A tunnel is, tunnel should be pretty self-explanatory. You know, it's under a thing.
Yeah, I don't know that I would ever mistake a hallway for a tunnel. I'm just going to throw that out. I'm just going to lob that out there. I don't know that I would be like going like from my bedroom to my bathroom and be like, hey, honey, I'm just going to go down the tunnel to the bathroom real quick. Because I got to use
Depends how long your hallway, I guess, is.
Well, yeah, or if it's underground.
That's true. A hallway underground, is that a whole new thing?
It's a tunnel is a hallway and an underground hall. I don't know.
See?
It's like a rectangle square situation. Like a square can be rectangle can't be a square kind of thing.
Oh, math. That's from your fifth grade math days.
Yeah. I always thought of it like as like a minivan and a motorcycle. The motorcycle can pull into the minivan spot, but the minivan can't pull into the motorcycle spot.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. I'm surprised there hasn't been some wise ass somewhere that went like, that's 4-wheel discrimination or something.
2 versus 4, it's whatever works for your life. But tunnel versus hallway, what were you going to say, Jason?
I would really, if we're going to get down to it, I think the corridor versus hallway, I think that's a synonym. I really do. I feel like that those could be used interchangeably versus like the tunnel can't be used interchangeably with those, like kind of what you're saying. But but corridor and hallway could definitely be just interchanged without question. I could say to you, it's down the corridor to the left, or I could say to you, it's down the hallway. Here's how I would distinguish between those two things. I would distinguish those two things based on whether it's a private. This is going to sound kind of crazy, but whether it's like a private building like a house or a public building like a school or like a government building. It feels like to me like a corridor. I don't feel like I have corridors in my house. Does that make sense?
Yes, actually, yes.
Right. Like if I was selling the house, I wouldn't say, it's a 2-bedroom, 6-corridor,
You should write that in. You
half.
might jack up the price a little bit.
Who mentions hallways in their house?
I got a 4-corridor I'm selling out on Walnut. It's gonna go fast.
2-bed, 2-bath, 4 corridors.
4 corridors.
And maybe even a garage. I don't know.
I could hear somebody not even knowing what the fuck I'm saying and going, that thing's got 4 corridors. It's got 4 corridors.
Why don't I have 4 corridors?
You should check.
Sounds fancy.
But to get back to my point, but I feel like that in a public building,
right?
I could say like, especially in an official building. Mm-hmm. So not like, a local restaurant or something, but like in a state building or the county government building, I would say it's down the corridor to the left. If you're looking for where you
private sector.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and for some reason, it doesn't even feel like a private company.
Right.
Is a corridor. It could be.
Okay. Going back to the whole teaching thing. When I was in Florida, we had outside hallways, but they called them corridors because there were doors outside of the buildings, and it was like, outside, you'd walk down the pathway, and that was a corridor, like third corridor on the left. But a hallway to me is enclosed with doors, where I think, oh, no, Frank, no. Where a tunnel might not have any doors. There you go, Frank.
I completely disagree with that. And it doesn't matter because we can see the light at the end of topic number 3, which is moving us on to topic number 4, heavy metal.
Ooh.
Heavy metal. The reference, I think that the reference here is music, but it could be the magazine. If anyone remembers it, did you guys ever hear of the magazine Heavy Metal? It was like a comic book in the late 70s. No.
Teach us, Obi-Wan.
I don't know a whole lot about the magazine Heavy Metal, even though I was a metal kid.
Can I grew up in point out if you're not watching this, our lovely producer Jason knows a lot about this, but
I do know a lot about heavy metal because I grew up in the mountains of Western Pennsylvania, we basically got one rock station, maybe 2 rock stations, and they played heavy metal music from the 80s, and that was sort of our conduit into the world. That was the lens through which I looked and viewed the world was heavy metal music. A couple magazines would come into town.
You could see the musical notes?
Yeah, I could totally see it. Metal, it was a very short-lived. Well, metal still exists. In fact, it's a very popular subgenre today of rock music. Like it's extremely popular, but in more of an underground kind of way, and it's been that way for about 30 years. But in the 80s, it was big mainstream music, right? So the heavy metal bands back then that would be selling out really, really big rooms eventually moved back down to smaller rooms. But where I grew up, it was king. It was absolutely king. It was like it was the music that you listened to. In fact, where I grew up, there are a lot of Skid Row T-shirts still floating around out there. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, if I go back home to Cambria County, Pennsylvania, there's a lot of heavy metal still happening, and it's a lot of the old stuff. Yeah, and it's just kind of what we grew up on. But I would be more curious to hear your perspective on heavy metal, Lauren. So you're from Lancaster County. Did you ever listen? Like, were you ever a fan of metal?
I feel like you have to be in a certain mood, and sometimes it can be like your day is just going so well, and you just need to like rock out in your car.
Yeah.
Or it could be the opposite, where you're just like, I need to get to my car so I can just scream out some heavy metal lyrics.
Yeah,
it's a vibe. It's a vibe. Do I have a lot of experience with it? No. Should I incorporate a little bit more into my life? Probably.
I think it's time. No, but in all seriousness, is there a band that would be considered heavy metal that you've ever been a fan of, or that like you've ever gone to a concert?
I feel like I'm going to get a lot of backlash for this.
No, it's fine. This is a no judgment zone.
I'm going to ask it in a form of a question. Is Metallica heavy metal?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Then that one.
Yeah, I mean, Metallica became the biggest heavy metal band in the world. In the mid to late 80s, it escalated, right?
Okay.
And in the 90s, and as these other bands were sort of fading away, and record sales were plummeting, and the grunge stuff kind of took over hard rock, Metallica continued to soar. In fact, I saw Metallica in '92 at RFK Stadium, like football stadium, with Guns N' Roses. They did a tour together, like a co-headlining tour. It's fantastic. So yeah, Metallica. So you're a Metallica fan. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Diggs, how about you? Any band that would be considered heavy metal?
I am not even going to try, because the only one I had was Metallica.
That's it.
It had metal in the word. That's why I was like, Metallica.
But see, they really did. They crossed over.
Oh, no. I wasn't saying I was a fan of them. That's the only one I could think of.
I'm just acknowledging their existence.
I know they exist. Yes, because honestly, I can't do it. It's because it's, to me, and I know they're different, but that leads into, is too close to like screamo stuff for me, and all of that just gives me a headache, and it's no. I'm sorry.
Speaking of, I have long hair, and have you guys noticed how disheveled I am? Have you guys noticed?
He's very put together.
Oh my God, no!
It
keeps flying out. I apologize. I'm going to apologize in advance for our listeners who aren't watching this right now. I'm a mess. I look like an old washed up heavy metal guy from like 19.
You need a cool T-shirt on.
I do, and it's the one under here is just not that cool.
I thought it was like you were just gonna like.
You thought I was gonna rip it open? It was gonna be Metallica. Yeah,
you know. Surprise, guys.
Metallica's still big, but the interesting thing about heavy metal, and I still follow a lot of it today. The subculture is very. I mean, there are a lot. It's like any subculture, right? There are factions, there are arguments, there's these weird histories where to the layman, someone sitting on the outside would be like, it all just sounds the same to me. But people are passionate. People who are into metal in any way, like across the board, are super passionate about I don't even remember what the scientific word is for the. You know how they name things in science, plants and stuff, like the different genus. Am I saying that right?
Genre.
But yeah, so the genre, like the diagrams of genres and subgenres are extremely complicated.
I'm gonna have to dive deep into this.
Yeah, it's a fascinating subculture. Maybe I'll do a 4-hour special on heavy metal someday.
Please.
It's time. I'm sorry to say this, friends, but it's time for topic number 5, the final topic for this
fast.
episode's 5 by 5. Well, there's still 5 glorious minutes left.
Okay, good.
The topic is worst textured food. Textured food. Ooh. Yeah, we're getting a lot of oohs. Getting a lot of thinking here.
I didn't think of food first. I just thought of things I can't touch. Is that weird? Can it be like food and or?
Well, what's the first thing you thought of?
Yeah.
Cotton balls. Isn't that weird? Like I cannot touch cotton balls. Like apparently if you do a little Google search, it's like a subgroup of humans that cannot touch cotton balls.
Like metal guys.
Yeah, sure. The cotton balls and the metalheads.
What's it do to you?
I just get, it's like the fingernails down the chalkboard feeling of like, ugh. Yeah, it's bizarre.
Can you eat cotton candy? Or is that different?
I guess my fingers are horrible with cotton, but my mouth is okay. I don't know. We haven't had a full body conversation about it.
Okay,
gotcha.
That's fine.
So worst textured fabric is definitely cotton. That's number 1 for
ball.
Laura. Anyway.
The ball.
They're just cotton balls, not cotton in general.
Yeah, I'm
just the
cotton.
ball. Yeah, just the ball.
Okay.
What about you guys for food? Tell me about your foods.
Yeah, Diggs, is there a food that you're just like, I can't do the texture?
Mushroom. Hands down.
Oh, I
Can't
could
do
see
it.
that. I could see it.
Cooked or raw or both?
Ooh.
Most cooked. If it's raw, I just don't like the flavor. But when it's cooked and it gets that weird like spongy, slimy
sponge.
No. And yet, I'm okay with okra, which is probably the slimiest food that's cooked.
Interesting.
Fried or just in its natural form?
I prefer it. I prefer it fried. I've had it stewed, which I didn't particularly care for. But yeah, fried. I could do raw, but fried is fried.
So anything fried is fine.
But that's really about the slime more than the texture, right?
Oh.
That's really
but
about
the texture itself is slimy. It's like it just there's nothing about it that isn't. It just. Yeah.
Are you guys all okay with oysters and all of that?
I don't like the way they look. I've never actually tried it because I didn't like the way it looked.
All right, we're gonna have to go have dinner and like figure out how we feel.
So unfortunately for me, so I am right now in my life, I am literally on my tippy toes, reaching up and tickling the bottom of 50. Like I am right there. Like I'm just about 50. And I was 40. I think it was 46 or 47. I developed a seafood allergy.
No.
A couple of years ago. I might have been 46. I have to do the math to figure out.
Which one was the superfood that surprised me? Because we talked about this. with Jamie.
Sardines.
Yeah. Did you know that, Lauren? Yeah.
No.
Sardines are it's really good for you, and I used to eat sardines all the time, and I developed this seafood allergy. I did eat a lot of seafood. I ate seafood kind of almost every day, but my doctor was like, no. I thought I had food poisoning. Long story. Anyway, I used to have no problem with any of the seafood, like the oysters and stuff like that, but now I can't do it. So we can't go out and test the texture theory, at least with me. I'm going to have to just stick with cattle or fowl.
Oysters are the same. I'm not following that. How are oysters the
Seafood?
same thing as fish?
Oh no, it's all it's we haven't determined.
that-
We haven't determined, and I'm not really ready to test it.
That's
Bring your EpiPen while you're trying foods. It's not really a whole vibe of fun.
That's
you know?
right. I had both fish. I had both like seared tuna and salmon that caused this issue, and then I also had just like a chowder, which had like clam and that kind of stuff in it, and I was just like, I got to get profiled to find out, and I just haven't taken the time to do it. There's plenty of other animals to eat.
Don't they say your allergies change every 7 years too? So maybe in 7 years you can
Shit. Well, great. Then I have 4 years left.
There you go.
Right.
You're at the end of it. That's good.
I'm coming down. Right. I'm almost halfway there. I don't think I was thinking about the texture thing. I don't think that I have a texture. Like I know people who have this whole texture thing. Like it's like, well, I don't, because they'll say, I like this food, or I don't like this food, and I'm like, well, you just had it. Like you had it on your pizza or something, and they'll be like, well, I don't like it this way because of the texture. And I've never had that issue. Like there's no thing that I can think of that I was like, there are things I don't prefer the taste of, but I don't think that it was ever because of the texture. Like I like all of it. Especially things like cottage cheese, where some people, that's one of the big ones.
Okay, now that you bring that up, I don't think I love it. I mean, I don't hate it. I just if you put a couple things in front of me, I'd be like, not that one though. You know?
yeah.
Maybe it's the taste though too. I feel like it doesn't wow me.
The cottage cheese. Well, I got used to mixing it with these like canned fruit, and I think it was more just a vehicle for the peach juice.
Peaches with a side of bumps.
Unfortunately, it's time to take the dirty dishes away and end this meal, my friends.
Oh, this has been great.
Because this is the end of episode 40 of 5x5. It's the fastest 25 minutes of podcast.
Yes.
Doesn't it just fly by?
We can just do this all day. I'm ready. Let's go another round.
Lauren's like, sign me up for 20 by 20.
Yeah.
We're gonna. Yeah. Hey, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you so much.
And we're so glad you're part of the Candy Factory community. It's been great to get to know you a little bit better, and we look forward to having you back on the show a little bit later on. Of course, big shout out to the mothership, the Candy Factory, coworkinginlancaster.com. Coworkinginlancaster.com. You can find out all the details about how you can join the community. And in these COVID times, come on, you got to get out of the house. We do it safely.
Yeah.
We got a lot of room. We got the masks. We got the. We physically distance. We don't socially distance because we love each other, but we physically distance. We do it safely. So check out Coworking in Lancaster. Come down and check it out and say hi to us. We will see you all next time on 5 by 5. The Candy Factory 5x5 podcast
Is a proud member of the Candy Factory Collective. 5x5 video can be found on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
Subscribe to the audio version wherever you get your podcasts.
The Candy Factory 5x5 podcast is recorded at the studios of the Candy Factory,
a co-working campus in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
The show is produced and hosted by Jason Mundock,
along with co-host Robert Diggs.
Editing and additional production by Anna Tran.
The opinions and views expressed on this podcast
are solely those of the expressor.
The Candy Factory is not in any way responsible if anyone said something stupid.
Our theme music was composed
and recorded by a really cool guy.
Really cool guy.
A really cool guy.
Really cool guy named John Chin.
Relevant links and show notes
can be found on the show post
at our website, candyfactorycollective.com.
Maybe that's it.
Is that it? Okay.
Candy Factory.
Collective.